Good evening, and welcome to this public workshop of the Board of Education. I am Board President Robert Silkworth. Tonight, the board will learn more from Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Mark Bedell, and AACPS staff on the recommendations for the fiscal year 2026 operating and capital budgets. This workshop is being broadcast live on AACPS TV, which can be found on Channel 96 on Comcast and Astound, and Channel 36 on Verizon. High-definition broadcast can be seen on Channel 996 on Comcast, Channel 496 on Astound, and Channel 2136 on Verizon. The workshop can also be viewed live on AACPS's YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, we will present to the board and the community the superintendent's recommended FY2026 operating and capital budgets. To get us started, Matt Stansky, our Chief Financial Officer, will take us through, and we will allow those who are presenting to introduce themselves. So I'll pass it over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Dr. Bedell. For the record, Matt Stansky, Chief Financial Officer. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Melissa Camella, Director of Budget.
Bill Heiser, Chief Operating Officer.
Kyle Roof, Director of Facilities.
All right, so as Dr. Bedell alluded to, we're going to walk you through the superintendent's proposed fiscal 26 or recommended fiscal 26 operating and capital budget. This is the first one I've done, and this is my 9th one, I think now, where we're actually having this after the governor's release of the budget. So it's actually good that we'll be able to have new information to share and discuss tonight in comparison to what we presented to you back in December. And so we'll start with this quote up on the screen. I thought it was pertinent to, really our theme for the budget, which was this board had just adopted a strategic plan. And that was really our guiding force around putting the recommendation together, and that, mirroring those two and then implementing whatever ultimately gets adopted using data to drive our decision making is really the focus of what we wanted to do in this budget cycle. So this is our chart around how the budget process works from kicking it off to budget implementation. This just depicts where we are. We're in between step 7 and 8. Superintendent recommended the budget to the board in December, and we are now in the midst of the board's review of that proposal. Just to acclimate yourself, we are requesting $1.8 billion in total operating funds. We'll first to break down the unrestricted budget, looking no change here in our federal impact aid. This is the funding we get from the federal government for having Fort Meade on property. This makes up for the lack of property taxes that the county can collect given the size of that facility. On the state side, we had estimated $588 million, which is $39.8 million increase over last year. We'll walk through a little bit later what is in the governor's proposed budget. This number is slightly different. On the county side, we are asking for $94.3 million in new county funding. The maintenance of effort, which is the minimum that the county government's required to give AACPS, is just a little over $5 million for next year. So this is much larger than that, but given our both our needs and our recent investments from the county, we felt it pertinent ask. So a little over $1 billion in total from the county. And then $2.2 million in local revenue. This is our use of fund balance and interest income. Interest rates are still elevated, and so we are still gaining more revenue from that as well. On the restricted side, again, we're seeing a decrease in restricted grants. This is, again, we had some essentially leftover COVID money back in fiscal 25 that is going away, but we are looking at potential entitlement grant cuts, titles 1 through 4, and so we're going to be monitoring that closely, both for this year and into the future as changes are potentially made to those grants. Our healthcare fund, this is what employees pay into the fund, so just shy of $54 million, so a $1.5 million increase there. And then we are projecting no change to the food service fund. So again, all in $1.8 billion and just $129.5 million increase over last fiscal year. Just in a pie chart form, a breakdown of that 1.8. So the majority, 56.3%, comes from county government, 32.5% from the state. Again, the state funding formulas are inverse proportion to wealth. Again, just to remind the board, meaning that the wealthier a jurisdiction is, the more the state expects the county governments to contribute to the school system. And so being that we're one of the wealthier jurisdictions in the state, the majority of our funding comes from county government. The remaining, again, 5% for local fund balance, 3.1% from the food service fund, and 3.1% from the federal government. So what drives our state and in some instances county revenue is our demographics, so our enrollment. So we're going to walk you through all the data points here, year over year change. So as September 30 count is 85,034 students, 683 student difference pre-K through 12. We are not funded on that number. We are actually funded on the K through 12 number, which is what we have the MOE number. So you see there, it's a 0.6% change, 493 students. Our compensatory education, which is calculated based on the students who qualify for free and reduced price meals in kindergarten through 12th grade, grew at 2.4%. Our multilingual learner identified students, K through 12, grew at 6.8%. Our special education population, which is calculated from ages 3 through 21, grew at 2.7%. Again, with the blueprint mandate of full day pre-K for tier 1 students, ages 3 and 4, that grew at 14% as we continue to expand that number. Next is we do get funding for the number of qualified teachers who have national board certification. You see a significant jump here. What I'm happy to report here is the state was able, teachers find out in the month of December whether they're qualified, which typically is too late for the state budget. So we've traditionally been a year behind in getting funding for our teachers. The state of Maryland was actually able to get that data from the national board in time to be able to put it in the state budget. So happy to report that we have, that's a significant increase there. It's also fully funded is our first maintenance of certification is fully funded. And happy and proud to report that we all should be that the state is also funding the additional $5,000 for lead teachers. And we are the only jurisdiction in the state of Maryland who's receiving that funding for next year. No one else has started the lead teacher program as of yet. We have 10 who qualified for that funding. And so we're able to get that additional $5,000. So once again, leading the way in implementation. Next, you see a decline in TSI, which is the number of students identified as struggling learners, grades K through 3. And so this is identified based on their third grade MCAP scores, and then extrapolated down to second, first, and kindergarten. Next, see a big jump in college and career readiness from 3,875 last year to 9,594. So this is due in part to better high school MCAP scores, but also a new metric now to identify students for CCR, which is a 3.0 grade point average. So this jump reflects that number. And then this is this generates funding for us to pay for dual enrollment, AP classes, IB, and CTE completers. And then last, we saw a decline in the number of students with IEPs who require transportation services. Again, I think it's important for the board to know like where we've been since the pandemic to where we are now. And so this chart depicts some of those changes as well. So we have now exceeded our height in pre-K through 12. This was 84998 was the peak enrollment. We've now exceeded that. We've not quite caught up in the K through 12. We're still a little short, about 244 students, but you can see how the county is changing demographically pretty significantly. You can see our compensatory education numbers are up 32.3%, multilingual learner up 37.3%, special education up 15.3%, and obviously pre-K, given the mandate to rapidly increase those populations as well. All right, so other factors that are contributing to what we get from state revenue is overall student enrollment. We talked about local wealth per pupil. And so that then generates a direct aid per pupil. So you can see now this is just hot off the presses. You can see statewide, Maryland's down 0.1% in overall student enrollment. Yet Anne Arundel County is one of 10 jurisdictions that actually saw an increase. So we saw the 7th largest increase in the state as far as percentage of overall enrollment at 0.6%. Again, so we're growing faster, which will actually make us on a wealth per student basis poorer. So you can see in the second slide, the statewide average growth in wealth per pupil was at 3.9%, and our growth is only at 2.8%. Now, you're going to notice a big look at Calvert, number 24, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on Calvert County, but what happened in Calvert this past couple of years is actually impacting revenue across the state. So Calvert saw a massive gain in wealth per student last year because they had what's called a pilot program expire with one of their liquefied natural gas facilities. So instead of paying property taxes, they were making what are called payments in lieu of taxes, which was not being calculated in the wealth formula. And so then that property got assessed when that pilot expired. Their wealth per pupil jumped. Everyone else's wealth per pupil went down, and we were beneficiaries last year. This year now, that pilot has been reissued. That property tax assessment comes off the books. They become extremely poorer now, and everyone else is, as a percentage of statewide, has become wealthier. For us, we're getting more state money this year because we have not grown on a wealth per student basis like the state. So good thing for us, and that's reflected there in the third chart. You can see Calvert's wealth per pupil, or total direct per pupil aid, jumped 27%. Ours jumped 6.6%, so it's sixth fastest in the state and over the state average. So that's good. We're getting more money from the state than what was anticipated. Other thing is what they call targeted student index. This is the percentage of your population that either qualify for an IEP, qualify for free and reduced price meals, or qualify for multilingual services. And the same student can be in all three different categories, which is why you see Baltimore City and Prince George's County over 100%. But for Anne Arundel County, we are below the state average. 66.2% of our population fall in one of those three buckets. Below the state average, hence we see more of our county money having to chip in for that. And then our overall local wealth per pupil, we talked about the percentage growth. We are still what is considered the seventh wealthiest per the state formulas in the state, above the state average. And you can see the 24 jurisdictions there on a wealth per student basis. Per pupil revenues total. So this is a chart we show every year. We're going to break this data down a little bit more between state and local. But this is fiscal 25. So this is not fiscal 26. This is where we are right now. So as of to the chart to your right is where we are for fiscal 25. These charts are produced by the Department of Legislative Services. And so we are currently sitting at 14th at $19,102 per student. So we did drop a spot from 13 to 14, even with the investments we saw from county government. We're still on a per student basis. We dropped a little bit. And for the vast majority of our neighbors, the jurisdictions that we border with are all at a higher per student revenue than AACPS, which again, I'll just drive this message home. It mandates us to not only advocate for more dollars, but the dollars we get, we have to be really wise and targeted with how we invest our dollars, because we just don't have the per pupil revenue that some of our neighboring jurisdictions do. So what makes up that number? We're 7,735, 19th in the state. We actually jumped one spot from 20 to 19 from last year. So we're 19th in per pupil revenue in state revenue, and we are 6th in county revenue. We're in, I would say a solid 6th place. We have a lot of work to do to catch Kent, Talbot, Howard, Montgomery, and Worcester. Major blueprint funding categories. These are the major ones that fund most of our budget. Basic foundation, state law currently is for fiscal 26, 9,226. But with the governor's proposal, that number is proposed to be reduced to 9,063. How much for compensatory ed? We're scheduled to get $7,842 per pupil. With the proposal that is now $7,704. Multilingual learner, you see 9,041. But with the governor's proposal, it's at 8,882. The governor did propose to hold special education harmless through the reductions, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So that per student amount remains at 9,503, and no change to the pre-K number at 14,473 students. And the services below are what is contemplated that could be used with those variety of funding sources. All right, where does our money go? So we're, again, a people organization. So the vast majority, just shy of 80% of our dollars go to salaries, wages, and benefits for our employees. And then you can see a further breakdown of that 80% in the box, where the vast majority, 89.6% of our personnel costs are in front of students every day. The remainder, you see 11.7% variable costs. You see the list of variable costs there. Our transportation, this is our contracted service portion of our transportation, is at 4.2%, 2.2% for utilities, and then our non-public tuition at 2.2%. All right, so we've talked about revenue, and now where's the money going? The $1.8 billion, you can see the $57 million is headed for compensation increases. We'll talk a little bit more about that. $9.9 million for contractual obligations and commitments, $23.8 for blueprint mandates, $3.2 in backfilling ESSER-funded programs, and then $42.5 million for enhancements for student achievement. And then you see the restricted offsets that cover what match what the revenue coming in for restricted budgets. All right, so the compensation increase is $56.9 million. We have a placeholder of $44.8 million. This is assumes a step increase or step equivalent for all eligible employees and a 3% cost of living adjustment for all employees. Estimate of $1.4 million, again, for the National Board salary and stipend mandate enhancements. We are estimating roughly $427,000 for folks who have chosen to go on to the career ladder that we've negotiated with our labor partners. Part of the blueprint mandate is for pre-K teaching assistants to have either a childcare certificate or an associate's degree. And so with that, we believe there should be an upgrade of that position given the requirements. And so this funding would enhance that job description, or that grade for that job description. We have negotiated a new salary band for Unit 2, and this would continue the placement of employees on that band for $220,000. Next is the Unit 3 salary structure. So we're hoping to get our starting salary up to $18 an hour for Unit 3 members. And so that proposal, we are estimating it would be at $657,613, pending negotiations. And then we had a salary study for Unit 5 and 6. This would again help implement that study over a multi-year term at $750,000. And then finally, we are requesting $8 million, additional $8 million to the healthcare fund to continue to be able to pay those invoices and keep our fund balance healthy in the self-insurance fund. On the commitment side, we are proposing to turn the Carver Center into an early education center in the 26-27 school year. And so we're requesting $275,000 to hire the principal and secretary for that new facility. $3 million for enrollment increases for Chesapeake Science Point that we have agreed to over a multi-year time span. And then $3.4 million for our existing charter and contract schools. As our budget goes up, the proportionate share of their budget goes up as well. And then $3.2 million for opening of the new Village Academy in August of 2025. On the blueprint mandate, at the moment, we have $13.4 million in for collaborative planning time. Obviously, with the proposal from the governor of delaying that 4 years, we will huddle internally and consider an amendment for the board to consider to possibly, remove that request given the revenue cut that is coming with it. So, but more to come on that as we flesh out exactly what's in the governor's proposal. But for now, our best understanding is there's a 4-year delay in the requirement to begin implementing that collaborative planning time. Next is a $3.6 million increase for College and Career Ready. Again, this is the funding that's supporting dual enrollment, CT completers, AP, IB. So this would continue those programs free of charge for students who qualify for College and Career Readiness. On the concentration of poverty grant, we are estimating $8.7 million enhancement. Based on the governor's budget, we are looking at adding, I believe, 8 new schools for next year to give us a total of 47 schools. But within his proposal, he is fully funding the program at fiscal 26, but then is contemplating a freeze of the program for fiscal 27 and fiscal 28, meaning no new schools can be added on to the program, and budgets at the FY26 level for existing schools would be kept at that level for fiscal 27 and fiscal 28. On the transitional supplemental instruction, so this was contemplated in the blueprint law, whereas this is funding again for K through 3 tutoring, mostly in reading, can be in math as well. But it is a $2 million hit. We believe this is not the wisest cut at this time, but this is what the law is contemplated. But you'll see later on in the presentation, we're going to be asking to backfill this given our focus on reading, the state's focus on reading. We also just believe it's the right thing to do. We believe these dollars have been put to good use. And so we're hoping, one, that we can get the funding restored in the state budget, but if not, that the county will fund the backfill for this. And then finally, the mandated career coaching program we have in partnership with the Anne Arundel County Workforce Development Board, that per student amount is increasing by $181,820. The ESSER funding cliff, we had through the Maryland Leads Grant, successful Grow Your Own programs. around teaching assistants becoming certified teachers or licensed teachers, I should say. Our existing teachers getting master's degrees in hard to staff areas like special education, multilingual learners. And so we would like to continue this support for that program now that the grant is expired. So we're looking for $602,000 to continue those tuition payments for those hard to staff areas. Our iReady software, this is our diagnostic assessment and our personalized learning tool that we've had since the beginning of the pandemic. We believe it's been successful. It's a good, and it gives a good indication of how students are doing and will do on MCAPs. And so we'd like to continue this at the cost of $0.5 million. It's been funded through a variety of COVID grants up to this point. And so we're asking now for it to be a permanent part of our general fund. Same with our learning management system. We adopted our first LMS back in 2020 and used COVID funds to do that. And so now that we have a new software coming online here for August of 25, we need the $1.1 million to successfully kick that off. Program increases, this is what I'm calling now our inflationary part of the budget. This is really just trying to maintain service levels. Starting with athletics, this funding for coaches, stipends, transportation, game officials, event supervision, athletic trainers, facility rentals to maintain our athletic programs. Educational options, this is additional funding for evening high school, twilight school, all of our credit recovery programs, home and hospital program, again, to continue to maintain the current levels of service for those programs. Nearly $4 million in operations. Utility rates are going up at a pretty dramatic rate. And so this is a budget to maintain, to be able to pay our utility bills, as well as service contracts for maintenance, $1 million for those service contracts as well. Special education non-public tuition continuing to go up, $2 million. The state now mandates that our non-public special education schools pay their workforce the equivalent amount that they're paying, that we pay our workforce. And so that is causing tuition rate increases, which are falling upon the district. And there's going to be, as we get into the governor's proposal, there's going to be more of that cost shift that we're going to be discussing. And then finally, a series of technology enhancements, $957,000. This is really to maintain our software licenses, both equipment as well, audiovisual and parts for installation in classrooms. The board has requested Dr. Bedell include the two positions, the constituent service positions, both for general constituent services and one for special education. So both are reflected in this proposal before you today. We are requesting an additional 4 classrooms for pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds to continue the expansion of the 4-year-old Tier 1 program, again, to meet that blueprint mandate and to get our students earlier in our schools to get them kindergarten ready. One of our priorities here, the English language development, you saw the growth not only year over year in that student population, but really since the pandemic. And so we are requesting a little over $2 million for first the conversion of some bilingual facilitators from 10-month to 12-month to be able to service those families year round. $1.5 million to support teachers, additional teachers for multilingual learner students. And then $327,000 to hire 2 new PPWs who are bilingual. On the school support side, $12.6 million in total. We'll break down. This is the 1.9. This is the backfill for the TSI cut. So this would reinstitute the vast majority of those positions that were being proposed to be reduced. Again, as I reiterated, early reading is a priority for this administration. It's a priority for the state. We feel it's money well spent and invested in this. Increase of $445,881 for co-curriculars. This would be stipends, materials of instruction, and transportation for robotics, Model UN, and mock trial. $6.1 million for a laptop program. So right now, the board's well aware, the Chromebook is the device of choice, really grades K through 12. What we are looking to do is get a more appropriate device in the hands of our high schoolers. And so this would begin a refresh program for grades 9 through 12, giving them Windows laptops, which would then also free up the Chromebooks to be redeployed to middle and elementary schools. So also just gives me another opportunity to plug that while we've talked about ESSER funding cliffs, the real funding cliff here is our student device situation, which was all purchased with COVID cash, and none of them are on a lease or a refresh. All of our employee devices are on refresh, right? So we have funding mechanisms in place to replace those every 4 years. We do not have that for student devices. And so this is really our first attempt to get those on a refresh program, but eventually we collectively, the administration, the board, are going to have to tackle this issue over the next probably 2 to 5 years on what the game plan is with our student devices, because Google has extended the support for those devices, but they will not extend them forever. And so we're going to have to come together and figure out how to best get the tools that our students need in their hands, but do it in a cost-effective way. Middle school athletics. This is year 2 of the 2-year plan. This is $1.5 million to round that out with the investments we made last year, and we'll be starting up our soccer program here in the spring. And then finally, a non-invasive weapons detection system pilot program. This would be funding to pilot a system like this in 2 of our secondary schools. Those schools are TBD, I guess, pending funding availability. Continuing on, school counselors, we're looking to add 3.5 school counselors at the elementary school level. We're also looking to start a security camera refresh program at $1.2 million. How we sort of replace cameras now is through a hodgepodge of different funding sources. What we're looking for is now a permanent recurring funding source to get our cameras refreshed in a more timely manner. In the world of apprenticeships, we're looking to add $265,000 to start a hospitality apprenticeship program here in the building at Riva. We have an unused cafeteria, and we'd like to get that up and running for the employees and also give students an opportunity to dip their toes in the water of hospitality. So we think this would be a win-win for everybody, meet our blueprint obligations, do something good for students, and help employees here in the building get a meal. And then the last 2, we have telehealth licenses. This would provide 100 licenses to give us a secure technology platform for mental health clinicians to engage with our students. And then a universal behavioral health screener for grades 6 through 12 at $220,000. Recruitment and retention, with our new agreement with the Teachers Association, we need our new teachers to come in an extra 5 days. And so this would be funding to pay them to come in to get that additional professional development and orientation to AACPS so they can start their first school year with our school district successfully. One of the other major priorities for the administration and Dr. Bedell is special education. And so again, you saw the growth here in the population year over year, as well as since the pandemic. And so we are looking for $14.3 million, $1.7 million in birth to 5, which would get us 26 positions, 129 positions in our comprehensive and specialized programming at $12.2 million, and then a personalized learning system that we currently have that's funded through a special education COVID grant. It's going away that we would like to continue at $325,000. And finally, transportation. We currently have alternate vehicles or vans in place. We are looking to get the drivers and aides to get those vans out on the road. Right now, they're used as spares, but we would really like to use them to transport our McKinney-Vento or our non-public students. And then $45,000 for support for transportation to the teen parenting program in Odenton. right, what are the issues at hand for us? I think clearly funding requirements and mandates for the blueprint of Maryland's future on top of potential revenue reductions. Again, you saw even with our priorities around special education, our priorities around multilingual learners, early literacy, but compensation and benefits continue to be a vast majority of our budget, and we are competing for a smaller and smaller pool of people. And so we have to continue to remain competitive, even if our per pupil revenue is less than Howard and less than Montgomery and less than Baltimore City. We still have to remain competitive and get those best and brightest folks. And then this board has heard me speak numerous times about our long-term sustainability. I feel like the last 3 or 4 years I've been coming to you, and we've had really robust budgets, but yet there's still a ton of unmet needs. So you can see here our unrestricted budget growth. This does not even include the COVID funding that we had. We're at 9.4%, 8.3%, last year at 5.1%, and we still have so many unmet needs that I don't know over the long term how we're going to be able to sustain this, because at some point that revenue growth is going to trickle back down to the 3-4% range, which we've all been used to for a while. But the needs are not only going to just be there, but they're going to be greater. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of think through why that is, what are systems and structures that can change that helps, but ultimately, what do we have to tell our funders in order to get us the revenues necessary to maintain the progress that we have. Okay, so we talked about the state budget, so let me go in a little more detail. So Dr. Burdell presented the budget to you that estimated $588 million. If the current law stays intact, that number would actually grow to 594.7, which would be great. But based on the proposed changes to state law for just the formulaic parts of our revenue, we're looking at $586 million. So from the proposal, from the recommendation in December, it's only about a $1.8 million reduction. So not too terrible. But ultimately, we would have liked to have seen that $594 million number. But understanding that there's, obviously a budget gap in the state that needed to be filled. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But there were some other things that I'll just say I didn't see coming, that other proposals that came, which is one, a teacher pension shift. So the governor is proposing $93 million statewide to move from the state budget to LEAs for teacher pensions. You can see here, based on the language, counties are going to be required to fund this outside of maintenance of effort, meaning they can't, within the maintenance of effort calculation, say, well, you have enough money, you can cover this new retirement impact. And so we'll have to work with our county partners to determine how to best get additional funding for this. So DLS is projecting that our share of the $93 million is $9.1 million. Now, what analysts have said is, based on the governor's income tax proposed changes, which is removing the itemized deductions and going with doubling the standard deduction. So, if the proposal goes through, citizens can no longer itemize their state income tax returns. You just take the standard deduction. That should be enough additional revenue for county governments to cover the increase in the teacher pension shift. So more to come on that, but we'll keep you posted. Next is, again, we've talked about there's a share between the state and LEAs on non-public tuition. What usually happens is the LEA pays the total cost, and then we get additional revenue from the state. There's a projected cut on that of $25 million statewide. Again, Legislative Services is projecting that AACPS's portion of that is $2.3 million. So again, we'll monitor, and if we can confirm that number, you'll see an amendment to the effect in February, reducing our revenue by 2.3. We talked about community schools, right? There's going to be a freeze there in fiscal 27 and fiscal 28. One other, not direct impact to AACPS, but services for students. The blueprint had contemplated a consortium of community supports, which is grants to nonprofits who provide mental health services for students. That budget is being reduced by $90 million. So while, again, doesn't impact the direct budget of AACPS, it does impact services that our students receive either outside of school or within partnership during the school day. So that is an impact as well. All right, I wanted to give the board an update on money files a student. This is, again, just to remind, it's kind of baseline ourselves. Fiscal 25 is a baseline year for us to meet this requirement. We have 3 years, fiscal 25, 26, and 27. So next fiscal year, we have to, whatever schools are not meeting the requirement, we have to reduce that gap by 50%, and then ultimately demonstrate 100% of students attend a school that meet the requirements by fiscal 27. Why this is can be a challenge. This is, again, just to show you an example. 2 elementary schools, roughly the same enrollment, 634 students, 651 students. But one is what we would consider a tier 1 school in our staffing model. Well, it has a compensatory education percentage of 13.48. So you can see the compensatory education funding and the multilingual funding there. But I want you to also pay attention to the average teacher experience in that school, which is 18.4 years. Now you go to school B, 651 students, what we would call a tier 4 school. It's a community school. Its compensatory education percentage is 60.24. You could see the significant increase in the dollars generated for school B. But yet, if you go to that bottom, the average teacher experience there is 12.98. So for school B, let me go back here, sorry. I'm showing these examples because I think a school like school A, even with higher class sizes, probably will be a compliant school. And it'll be a compliant school because their average teacher, we're paying their teachers more, right? So you're teaching 3rd grade, you can make $95,000 a year, or you can make $59,000 a year, still teaching 3rd grade. And so that average teacher experience is really going to be a major factor in whether schools are compliant with money filing a student or not. And so I just want to kind of lay that foundation for the board and for the public as we begin to work through these issues, as data starts to become public around which schools are in compliance, which schools are not in compliance. A major factor is not just going to be allocations, what the class size is, but who is in that position and how much money they're making. Quite frankly, what kind of health insurance plan people pick, because it's all dollars and it all impacts whether a school can make it or not. So I think more conversations to come on this as we start to get through the year and continue on. So, right, what are factors influencing, right? We have a fixed number of classrooms and resource rooms in a school. We could add more teachers to a school that's not compliant, but if we don't have space, then what are we doing? I've already mentioned low poverty schools tend to have more experienced teachers, causing them to not only just meet, but may actually exceed the dollar amounts that the school has been allocated. And then special education and transportation costs continue to exceed our available federal, state, and local revenues for these programs. And so we're now having to use other blueprint funding to fund our special education program. For AACPS and many districts around the state, we still have budgets and expenses centrally in some cases that we are having to either manually move them out to the school level or create workflows to get them out to the school. For us, employee benefits is a perfect example, but we're working through that with our partners in IT to now begin to direct charge some of those benefits to the school. We may need to look at structuring programs differently depending on what happens. And we just also need to be mindful of unintended consequences or of any proposed changes, right? So we're not proposing any changes this year, but this is just me letting the board know that, depending on how compliance works with this provision, whether there's any changes this session around it, fiscal 26 will be a tough year, but fiscal 27, when we have to get to that 100%, may have to have some difficult conversations about allocations. Speaking of allocations, this is just a FYI for the board. We plan to release initial staffing allocations a little earlier this year, February 10th. And we are not anticipating any major formula changes to FY25 to again continue our path to compliance of money following the student. If there are formula changes we decide to make, we will certainly keep the board informed on that before releasing anything to the schools. And with that, I'm going to stop talking for a second and turn it over to my colleagues, Dr. Heiser and Mr. Roof, for the capital budget.
Thank you, Mr. Stansky. So the FY26, just as a review, this is a very high-level overview of the capital budget. You'll be reminded that our capital budget process began earlier in this school year, and on September 18th, the board voted to approve the superintendent's recommended FY26 capital budget and 6-year capital improvement plan. So it will move forward on the same trajectory and timeline as the operating budget now. The ask and the request is for approximately $204.6 million. It includes a combination of major capital and recurring capital renewal projects that you see listed on that slide there. The major capital projects total $137.9 million. And as you know, a significant portion of the FY26 request is for funding of the Old Mill Master Plan projects. We're currently constructing the CAT Center and anticipate bidding for the high school replacement project within the next few months, which we're excited about. The final component will be completion of the Old Mill Middle School North, and construction funding for this project is requested in this FY26 budget. You also see recurring projects for $66.7 million, and you see a number of recurring projects listed there, which help support and ensure that our schools are maintained at a high level. This next slide shows the anticipated project support from the IAC, known as the Interagency Commission on School Construction, and Built to Learn funding, known as BTL. Total support from both agencies is $88.5 million, and that's broken down between $41.7 million from the IAC and $46.7 from BTL. We anticipate support from the IAC in the amount of $25 million for the construction of Old Mill High School, and BTL is expected to support $46.7 million of the construction project for Old Mill High School. On the right side of this slide, you'll see several individual school systemic projects and the amounts anticipated to be covered by the IAC. The IAC will address our request in May of 2025.
All right, just important dates. The board's scheduled to vote on a budget February 19th with a weather or continuation date of February 20th if necessary. Per county charter, the board has to submit something to the county executive by March the 1st. The county executive has until May the 1st to introduce his recommended budget to the county council, which will include our request. There will be council public hearings and a work session in May. And then per the charter, the county council has to strike a budget by June 15th. And per the board calendar, we are scheduled to confirm that vote on June the 18th with a July 1st implementation. So with that, Mr. President, thank you for indulging. And we are here to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Stansky. So we're going to go in roll call order this evening, and we'll be starting off with Ms. Pullum.
Okay, I just want to thank all of you so much for your time, Mr. Stansky and Mr. Heiser and team. I know this isn't easy when you're talking budgets, and this fiscal, the environment that we're in is not easy. I'm going to wait for the next time around for questions, but as I'm gathering my thoughts, but there's something that's been keep coming up in my head, and I just want to share this with you. You mentioned unmet needs, and that's something that's really been kind of coming back in the back of my head. Coming on as a first year, your fire hose of information, all the bright, shiny new programs. It's so exciting, all the plus ups and things that we're looking at. But then I think about the three other words that you mentioned: unintended consequences, sustaining, and then of course unmet needs. So what's going on in my head right now is, what are those programs that we are not, what are the unmet needs in terms of programs that are core to the scorecard and the outcomes that we want to meet. And one of the comments at one of our meetings was, your traditional programs, do it right before you add on. So I just want you to know that's something that I'm thinking about, with, especially when you talk about sustaining. We want to make sure our core programs are being met and we're doing them well. And I'm still learning as much as I can from all of you, and there's questions that we've been asking, but then also, and then the other question, are there any of those programs that, due to where we are any of those time for pasture, if you will, so that we can make way for these new programs. So these are some of the things that are going on in my head. But definitely, I'm very just thank you for your help as we're going through this process. But again, it's really what are those unmet needs, and we don't want to be in a situation next year where all of our programs across the board are not where they need to be. So that's kind of where I am. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Schauheim.
First, I want to say thank you so much for the presentation tonight, answering. I always have a lot of questions. I will always have a lot of questions. I asked them. I'm grateful for the responses, even when they're tortured. And some of mine definitely were, but I am grateful for all that. Oh boy, I have so much. Okay, so we locked eyes on something you said, Mr. Stansky, that I'm gonna poke at right away, and that is the school A versus the school B scenario and the implications for staffing. So while I, along with so many others, lobbied for Blueprint, and I believe in it, I still do. In my district, the money following the student has had a fair bit of unintended consequences when it comes to staffing allocations and ballooning class sizes to the point where when parents come to me and are upset, I tell them I don't blame them, like school class sizes well north of, or 30, at least 30 students in an elementary school class, some of them higher. What I think I heard you say is that that's going to go up. Was that the between the lines reading I had on that?
So I think what I was trying to convey is, I don't think the foundation amount is enough to run a school. I don't quite have hard data yet on that, but early indications are right. Yeah. So we have in our low poverty, low multilingual learner populated schools, what we're seeing is, to your point, elevated class sizes. I think we did as best we could to reduce the number over 30, right?
100%. 100%.
But what we're seeing early on is those schools are going to meet the minimum funding requirements. And they're going to meet them because the faculty in those schools are just paid higher, because ultimately the compliance is around how much you're spending. Not what you've allocated, but what you've actually spent. And if teaching third grade costs more at school A than school B, that school is going to have a better chance of making it. And so what I'm signaling is, without any legal change and without any guidance around waivers, which again, the law allows for the AIB to provide waivers, I think we're going to struggle in really kind of our two extremes. Our low poverty schools, probably will have elevated class sizes. And even though we have smaller class sizes in our high poverty schools, because of the makeup of the workforce, because of vacancies, those schools won't make it. And so what do we need to do to get those schools to to make it. And it's not like, one of the frustrating things that's been about this exercise is that it's just very compliance driven. And what we're trying to get away from is it being an accountant and bean counting exercise, and more of what do students need, and how do we get them the resources that they need. But how do we do it where we can show it to state regulators that that we're meeting the intent, which is, based on demographics, school B needs more than school A, but how do we do it to where we're not pitting the two against each other is I think what you're getting at. But yes, I was signaling that without some sort of change to the compliance requirements or the funding formula, right? Like we're losing foundation funding in the proposal that was released last week. So that makes it even harder for schools that don't get compensatory funding, that don't get multilingual funding, to have enough money to operate and have what we'd all consider reasonable class sizes. I think how do we get to that point where we're not pitting school A against school B?
Well, yeah. I'm going to, I represent District 5, that's broad next to Vernon Park and now part of Arundel clusters. And last year, it did feel very much like A versus B. We're pitting them against each other type of situation. And parents were apoplectic. And they're going to be more so if we continue to do that, because their class sizes matter too. And their teacher workloads matter too. And all of their extracurriculars and the stuff that they enjoy matter too. And we'll get to that. I have so much to say on that. And I'm not, so, I mean, whoever we all got to talk to at the AIB, I mean, hear my voice on this recording. Having class sizes north of 30 for elementary schools is not okay. It wasn't okay years ago. It's not okay now. It won't be okay next year. And that's not even getting into what middle and high school class sizes are. So I'm gonna beat this drum. I'm gonna beat it loud, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat how I feel about this. And I know you all are doing your level best. You did last year. I nagged you to death. I'm sorry. It's gonna continue. But the blame isn't on y'all. Y'all are trying to make lemonade out of a bunch of sour lemons, and I get it.
Yeah, and I appreciate all those comments, Michelle. And again, I think you go back to the chart where we're 14th right now per pupil revenue, right? Like we don't have some of the resources some of our colleagues have. And I'll just say though, right, our special education performance, our multilingual performance is in the single digits. And so we made a conscious choice. We sacrificed a lot in this proposal to you all that we wanted to do, but we felt like those two areas had to be addressed, along with compensation for employees. We obviously would have loved to do more than what we're proposing, but given and knowing that our county request is $94 million, right?
Yeah.
And we've never seen north of 50. So we're gonna, foreshadowing again, tougher decisions that we're gonna have to make here. But this is just where we are at the moment, and in the budget that's in front of you.
Yeah, no, I know. To the revenue point, I say this every year and I'll say it again. I am willing to pay my fair share, y'all. We can't have nice, fancy, shiny things and good education, public education for our students, unless we are willing to all help pay for it. So, so that goes to our county and our state folks to make decisions there. I know I've taken up a little bit of time. I have a lot more. So we'll get into, well, I'll that technically was one question. I'll do one more and then you're gonna have to come around to me again. So I want to talk about social workers. So I heard from you all. I think we all did. This does matter. I do care. I care deeply about mental health positions. I voted in favor of at least the base of what was put in front of us every year, if not trying to elevate that number. And so I asked a series of questions about pay, compensation of that group, related to pupil personnel, related to psychologists, related to school counselors. And yeah, my math is not the best, but what I got back, then I had more questions about, like, oh, what I'm hearing from folks doesn't seem to be shown on this, what was given in front of me. So I don't know how to ask. I would love to daylight like what I got in some way. So I don't know if you want to speak to our conversation today and what I asked today about that.
Yeah. So I think a couple things. One, so we have a few social workers that work 12 months, most work 200 days, which is in our 10-month bucket. Same with counselors, right? We have a share between 10-month and 12-month. Our PPWs do work 12 months. Our psychologists do work 12 months. And so, I think part of the hard part of comparing is we have some folks that just work more days than others due to the requirements of the job. I think without question, the team, Ms. Jackson, Mr. Vogelin, Dr. Bedell, we value what the social workers bring to the table. But currently we don't have a social worker vacancy, so we're fully staffed. We did compare our salary ranges with those of our neighbors, Montgomery, Howard, and we feel like we're within the range of pay that they are as well. And so ultimately, though, this is if this is something through the negotiations cycle that needs to be addressed, certainly our partners, our labor partners can bring that, or if the board wants, can amend the budget to bring that as well. But from our perspective, we value what the social workers do, we value what they bring to the table. But given the current vacancy rate, which is 0, and given the comparisons where they are with other the jurisdictions that employ social workers, we feel comfortable where we're at the moment.
Okay, I appreciate that. For all those listening at home, the numbers that were put in front of myself and the rest of the board, I couldn't see a discrepancy between, I think the argument was we're the lowest paid of the mental health professionals, and with my eyes and my math skills, I couldn't see that. So please help me understand. If y'all are listening to this, write me, let's talk about it. I want to know more. I want to understand more, because my math at this moment, I'm not getting there with that. Please come around. I have so much more. Extracurriculars, music. Stay tuned.
Okay, Ms. McFarland.
Thank you so much for all your hard work on this presentation. So as you're working on this, and it's been fabulous, we're hearing from the people who work from our school system, from programs, that feel like there's needs that are unmet within what we currently have. So to Ms. Pulliam's point, I do think we need to focus on making sure that the staff we currently have, the programs we currently have, are fully funded, and that they have all the resources they need before we dive into new projects. We do want to reach for the sky, obviously. We want to give our students the best of everything, but we need to make sure that we have this solid foundation first, caring for the programs we already have and the people we already have. So I just want to kind of dive into that a little bit and looking at this, and I'm sure I'll have some other questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think this budget actually reflects that. Again, the theme around compensation, special education, early literacy, multilingual learners. These are all large, significant programs that we have in place that we need enhanced. I think you saw the data again on the growth in multilingual learners and special education students. And, quite frankly, we have not had many new positions, if any at all, the last 4 years in those programs with the growth in those populations. And so it is long overdue from our perspective that we see some investments in those programs. And so just want to make sure we're not going away thinking there's going to be new multilingual learner programs or new special. It is really just enhancing what we're doing to help support those groups of students.
Ms. Stent?
Good afternoon. So I will echo what everyone else said, but you guys always do a great job of laying out the budget. Where I'm concerned is I got the message that there's going to be some constraints. I got the message that you've emphasized the most important programs that the board has put out are our priorities as well. What I don't see in there is, and I think that it may be helpful for me, is the risk. Inside of the budget, I saw you had the slide that says issues at hand, right? I can read through the, minutia of what you mean by issues at hand. But I think publicly, people have to understand the risk that's associated with the constraints. Yes, the governor has laid out his budget, but also there's a really high dollar budget that's going to come to the county. I hope the county can find a way to find the money. It's not my problem. It's a county problem. I'm going to ask for it. But in reality, right, if we don't get some of this money, there's going to be some hardline decisions. I like to have information that tells me what programs are we looking at potentially cutting if we're constrained. And I think that goes along with me something saying risk, impacts, concerns. And maybe Dr. Bedell has that. We just don't have it. I would like to see what those risks are. That's one. The second one is that the Maryland Blueprint. As you know, it's been buzzing for the last couple of years. There is no way that we're going to find the money in the next 4 years to cover all the things that we want to do in Maryland Blueprint. But as a district, we've got to do the best we can with the money that we have available. And so I'd like to, and this is not a tonight thing, I'll send this to you in an email. I like to see the programs that are under Maryland Blueprint, that in the event that those programs are cut, what is the impact it's going to have on the educators that write us so very often about what Maryland Blueprint has promised to them? Because the honesty, the God truth is that's going to fall back on us. It goes back to staff morale and everything else that's associated with it. So I think we have to think through what that looks like and not wait until someone tell us, well, the money is not coming. So I'd like to see that. And then finally, I'd like to say, I hope with the capital budget, and this is for Dr. Heiser, you've done a wonderful job with the capital budget, and I know that you guys are doing everything that you can. But when a child goes into a classroom, I really do want our classrooms to represent the school and not where the neighborhood that the child comes from. And so all of the work that you're doing, I just want to say thank you for what you've done in District 1. It's not been one time that I have not called that you haven't responded, and I appreciate that. And I ask that that continues. So I didn't see anything in the capital budget that gives me any concern. Is there anything I should be concerned about over the next couple of weeks as we go into the county's budget that is going to impact the capital budget?
State funding is probably one of the areas that we need to keep an eye on. It's lower than we anticipated, and the funding formula that they set out this year is slightly different, which reduces our funding for Anne Arundel County and kind of shifts funding to more to counties that are less wealthy than us. So overall impact, we have our 75% recommendations from the IAC. We're hoping for increased funding given the governor's budget, but we definitely need more assistance when it comes to capital funding from a state revenue and allocation perspective.
Okay, so the formula that you are discussing, you have the formula currently, or it's a new formula that they're sending us?
They gave us a target allocation
Okay, so
in September, and it's lower than we anticipated.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, not only for this year. We've been pleased with the relationship that we have and the communication, the dialogue, but years out projections aren't as positive, and so that's something to advocate for.
Yeah, again, I see 23, I think, to 25, but the problem seems to come in 26 through 29. And so that's why I said I'd like to try to think ahead and the impact of everything that we're doing, not today, but in the 3 years, I said 4 years, but the next 4 years that is coming in. So that's all I have, Mr. Sickworth. Thank you.
Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. Thank you all. Just to follow up quickly on Ms. Dent's last questions, I do know there was a county that the IAC did not fund a project that they were well into in the middle of it, and suddenly the county had to scramble. Do we have any indication that we could find ourselves in that position with these new buildings that we're putting up?
We're in a good position this year when it comes to BTL funding. So that's really been our lifesaver for the last 4+ years, since 2020. So it's a secondary fund outside of the capital program that allows MSA to issue bonds on behalf of school construction. And we have been the beneficiary of almost $200 million of that, which has really helped propel the old mill complex construction. Without that, we would be years behind.
Yeah.
That revenue is ending.
Yep.
We need another source to continue the momentum that we're doing right now.
Duly noted. Thank you. So I have a couple of comments and a couple of quick questions. I hope quick questions. I was surprised to see sped transportation down. Any idea what's going on there?
No, I mean,
Given the growth in the population.
it's a state count. Yeah, I was surprised too.
Yeah.
But it is, the state sends the form and it's a pre-populated count. And so, yeah, I was surprised as well. But that's a mark that goes, since I've been studying this, goes up and down.
Goes up and down?
Yep.
Huh, okay. I think I've raised this before. So there was not a request for additional social workers in the budget this year. And it is my understanding that was due partially, I mean, many considerations, I'm sure, but there was a notion that in some schools, the community schools funding could support additional social workers as needed. My question is, what does that mean for schools in need of a social worker that don't have community schools funding? Would that potentially shift positions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say potentially if we'll call them district funded social workers are in those community schools, the community school can fund a social worker on their own. It could potentially reallocate one, or if that community school needs two, they might have one district and one community school funded. So there's a potential for a reallocation though.
Okay. With regard to some of the other earlier conversations that several of my colleagues raised about focusing on core programs and ensuring that we're putting the dollars where they're most needed, most impactful. It does seem to me that one of the arguments I always try to make with our funders, and I'm sure others do too, is where the investments will have the greatest yield. And in my experience, that is usually early on, right? So the pre-K, birth to 5, I was glad to see the birth to 5 focus. And things like community schools. I'm frankly very concerned about what I see in the governor's budget, freezing community school funding moving forward, because that is essentially a drop in services because of inflation and increasing costs. But it's also asking precisely the children with the highest need to wait again for 4 years. And I'm just saying this publicly. I think it is a huge mistake. And I hope, I know the governor has said multiple times this is his initial proposal. So presumably there's much negotiating to be done in the halls of the General Assembly. But I would hope those who are paying attention will recognize that the children who are going to be impacted that are precisely the children who can least afford to be impacted that way. And also, we are on our way to actually turning some corners we have hoped to turn for a very long time. And the latest results of the report card and others would seem to tell us that the community schools funding is doing its job. And so I feel very strongly that this is a real problem. I'd just also like to add I think the example you showed of School A, School B is very important, and thank you for walking us through that. And I agree, we do not want the notion that schools are pitted against each other. That being said, it sure as heck shows up something that I think is actually a deeper root cause of so many issues that we face. And that is how segregated in so many different ways our communities are. Because actually what it really tells us is you want a balance in the school, right? For those funding formulas to work, you want a balance. You don't want a school in one place with 97.8% farms and another with 10% or 5% farms. That's sort of an unhealthy way for a society to be. And so I'm just putting that out there because I do find it interesting that whatever the difficulties with the blueprint are, and I, like many of my colleagues, support the spirit of the blueprint. I think there are so many really good things in it, but boy, it sure shows up some of the deeper problems that are going on that surround our schools, aren't caused by our schools, but surround them. And I just hope as a society, we continue, some of us at least, to think about that. I have a couple of other things I will ask in the next round, but thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Yeah, we will have a second round. So I have some comments and maybe a few questions. I was struck by the comment that.
Sarah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
It's
sorry.
fine. I didn't want to have to follow up Dr.
No,
Tobin
I'm
anyway.
sorry.
I'm just going to ask some quick questions. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So before I do what I was going to do, Ms. McDermott.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
President. Just a couple of items. I've seen in the questions or the responses that your team has provided for our questions that the amount to pay our fourth grade teachers for overnight field trips comes out to about $76,000, which when we're looking at this budget is pennies. I would really love to see us push for making sure that our teachers are properly compensated for their time with our students. Second, I just wanted to echo Dr. Tobin's beautiful comments about everything, but about the community schools situation. I just recently toured Meade Middle School, and they are doing fabulously, and I would hate to see their services cut when they're really just getting their stride. And finally, just a quick question about the telehealth digital licenses under school support. It's $33,000, but what grades will those be directed towards? Do we know?
I don't. We can get back to you.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
we'll get back to you.
All right, thank you.
Yep. 6 through 12.
Okay, so the same as the behavioral health screener?
There you go.
Got it.
Thank you. So now it's my turn. So I was struck by the comment that we can be great and we're on a mission to become great. We can be great if we have the resources. And the question, I guess, does this budget in its current form allow us to have those resources? I have to say I'm a bit frustrated perhaps by the state because if they need to make cuts, why did they need to make cuts in one of the areas that is probably one of the most important areas to impact our children, and that's the community schools? That makes no sense to me why they would do that, except that they don't necessarily know the tremendous impact that has. Hilltop Elementary, 2 stars. No, 4 stars. Are we concerned about the mental health of our students and our staff? I am. Does this budget reflect what we need to make sure that we take care of the mental health of our students? Do we need some additional social workers? I think there were, was it 3.5? Was that 3.5 additional counselors? 3.5 additional counselors. Is that enough for the 85,000 students that we have? I do have a question or two. I think I know the answers, but am I right in saying that a 1% increase in a COLA for all of our employees would amount to $1 or $9 million? A little more than $9 million.
You're correct.
Okay. Okay. When it comes to our guidance counselors, correct me if I'm wrong, guidance counselors who are NBCT certified do not receive the stipend.
They do not.
Again, that's a decision not made by us. That's a decision made by some folks at the state who didn't think that guidance counselors impact students. They're not teachers. I'm sorry, but they are teachers. So my question would be, if we were to pay the current guidance counselors who have NBCT, how much would that add to this budget?
Well, I think we provided it last year, but we'll refresh the number for you.
Yeah,
Get
that's
back to you.
fine, no
Yep.
problem. So I don't mean to ramble, but I have a few other things. I think in the budget there's $3.9 million for utilities.
2.9 for 3.9 for utilities and maintenance contracts. So about 2.9 of that is utilities.
In today's world, I just took a look at my recent BG&E bill, and it wouldn't come up to that figure, but it just makes me wonder if that's actually enough for us to make sure that our students are in safe schools that are nice and warm. Under co-curricular club expansion, I think it was $445,000. Does that include bus transportation?
It does.
Okay. Okay. And I mentioned 3.5 school counselors. Again, I'm not sure that is enough. We've had some discussions, I believe, about some signature programs such as an agricultural, perhaps, in District 7, and maybe some teacher programs in a few of our schools. If we were to decide to move forward with those, would there be funding in this budget to do that?
No enhancements for any of either to start up a program such as that or expand the CAM program, which we have for teachers. So no, not at this time.
Okay. And finally, for right now, just our athletic programs do generate revenue.
Yes.
So if we consider the revenue generated over the course of 1 year by all of our athletic programs, versus the actual cost to implement all of the programs. I'm just wondering, are we showing a profit?
We are not. But I can get you a number, but I can assure you we are not generating a profit.
Okay. Okay. All right, that's all I have for right at the moment. We're going to do a second round. I think we should be doing that. I believe we should do that. And so, Ms. Plum, we're back to you.
Thank you, President Silkworth. So pulling on the thread of the agriculture programs, in District 7, we do have the Southern FFA program, which is an intra-curricular program versus a co-curricular program. What I'd like to just, and I sent an email earlier, Mark, so if you don't have that information, this is fine, but it's something that I can send later. What I really want to better understand is how both of those how both the co and the intra are funded, and then what is that formula for that? Because as you mentioned, we do want to grow the agriculture program. It has been very successful. I'm not looking for big line items here, but if we say we want to grow something and there's not any funding to really follow that, it kind of puts a negative taste in everyone's mouth. So I want to see that we can, in order to grow, have to put some funding so we can start building that plan.
Let me answer that one. I think everybody who's heard me speak has been aware that I've probably been one of the biggest advocates for wanting to see an ag program take off in this school district. And I think sometimes I have to be realistic about what I want, given the current state. I think that there is a way that we can take a look at this and try to do it the right way. And we are engaging with Magnet Schools of America that will come in and they will do a comprehensive audit of what we have to offer in terms of CTE, because I know what I want is going to cost a lot of money to do it the way that I want. And when you think about the budget outlook and what we're hearing right now, it may require that when we get these results back based on student demand and interest, it will help us to try to figure out what is the proper course to take. And so that is the reason why there's nothing in here around expanding until we can get some more outside data to then figure out what is it? Is it an enhancement to what we have? And if the demand is calling for us to do it as big as I want, then let's go. But that's the reason why there's no funding
Right. So
to expand.
just to clarify, and thank you, Dr. Bedell, really what I'm looking at is the co-curriculum, the intra-curriculum, that formula, because that's really the first step of laying that brick. So we already have the foundation. It's seeing how can we measure up to the co-curriculum, which is much more, I think, reasonable, because right now that program is fundraising for pretty much everything that it does.
Got you. So yeah, Ms. Foley, we did get your email. And so, what we can commit to you is giving you just a comprehensive overview of co-curriculars from elementary to middle to high school, how they're funded, what funding sources there are available. And hopefully that will get you the answer you need for next steps.
Yeah, no, thank you. That so it's really that piece, the low hanging fruit. Next one, reduction in STEM. I wanted folks to hear there was a reduction in the STEM programs, and then I saw there was a slight increase for some of the co-curricular. So the reduction in STEM, can you just provide a little feedback as to why that budget line item was reduced?
Give me 1 second.
And the question keeps coming up in email, so I want folks to hear that at home as well. And if you don't have it today, that's fine.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Yeah, let us get back to you
Okay,
on
that's fine.
in writing on that one.
And I'll keep my other question for later, but thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Bedell, for that. But we want big, the way you were thinking. Thank-
There's an answer to this.
That's what I want
Why I
to,
can't
but
find it.
man, yeah, we need money.
Start small, start small. Build.
Ms. Shaw.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna try to find my zen here. So I'd love to talk about extracurricular activities. I'd like to talk about music. I'd like to talk about unmet need, and some of the testimony we received, and some of the emails we've been receiving breaks my heart. So let's go. I am very interested in folks having what they need, because just like sports, this is some kids' reasons for coming to school and for engaging at all, and it's very important. And so, yes, I understand that to play an instrument requires a different set of skills than any of our other wonderful extracurricular activities or our in-school day extras and electives and programs. So we have to have what the kids need in elementary school and be able to meet those needs so that they can go on and be successful in middle and in high school. And in some of our schools, there's just some discrepancies with staffing that I'd like to talk about, like how we got here kind of stuff, and what can we do to fix it, because we do have some, and leaving out Apex, because that's a whole different animal. I don't even know if I want to touch it or have the ability to go there. But I just want to know, like, how is it that some middle schools and high schools with really low total enrollment for band and orchestra relative to some schools that only have one singular human to teach band 678, orchestra 678, with a total caseload north of 250 without advisory, how that's able to be sustainable if we're talking about meeting kids' needs, especially in that area. So the numbers I have in front of me that we all got are actually correct. That's why I hopped down and talked to a lovely staff member in our audience. The band numbers in Severna Park Middle are actually 150, orchestras 107. Do some math. That's for one singular human. So I just confirmed that. And so I just want to know how we meet those needs before we expand and go to other programs. If we're saying all the time that that all kids should belong, grow, and succeed. I know that was long and rambling.
So I will try to I'll try to be concise and
Thank you.
to the point.
In the absence of my concise.
No, it's fine. So the way we staff middle and high schools is really on a student staff ratio, and a middle and high school then gets a X number of staff that they then schedule courses with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a choice of the building administrator and their team as to whether to allocate an FTE to orchestra or band, or to allocate 2 FTEs, one for orchestra, one to band, again, depending on enrollments and other course offerings. That's, so we don't have an allocation like a ratio for, you have 300 students in orchestra, so you get 1.5 teacher. Like, that's really, those decisions are made at the school level.
They are made at the school level?
They're school made at the school level.
Okay, so they're not made by that department over more broadly.
At the elementary level, they are made by the department.
But in middle school, it's made
middle
by
and
the
high
school
school is
level.
made by yep.
I have to argue here a little bit. Like, if we don't want some of the wonderful people we employ to teach our children any subject, could be math, could be English, could be music, could be drama, to have that high of a caseload would burn me out with a quickness. So like, I mean, I just hope that we're able to solve that so that we don't lose folks and then therefore lose programs. I want to talk about extracurricular out-of-pocket expenses. And I asked a bunch of questions about this too. And some of this I knew because I'm a band mom, and you know, we talked to other band moms, and those people get sticker shock when their kids go into marching band in high school. I don't have one quite there yet, but we're getting there. And then hearing for what like athletics parents pay, and the discrepancy is wild and unaffordable. And so I just want to know, and I had some answers, but again, daylight. How those decisions are made, what to fund, and also in terms of transportation and whatnot, and what aren't. Is this just a hole we've been in for ages? And then how do we provide some equity to get out of it?
Great question. It's been a hole that we've had for a long time, real long time. This board, previous boards we've initially targeted fees we used to charge for mandated classes, right? This district used to charge students fees for mandated classes. And so I think right when you got on, Michelle Heim, we started tackling those fees, right? So increasing budgets to put the idea that no student, if we mandate a class to be taken, we shouldn't be charging a student a fee to take that class, right? But that was hundreds of thousands of dollars we had to infuse into schools to make that happen. I think this inequity does exist. It has existed along with others. Doesn't make it right. It's, I'm trying not to have this sound as like an excuse, but we didn't dig this hole, overnight, and we can't get out of it overnight either. And so we're going to have to systematically work our way through these inequities as we approach them. Also knowing that there are pay inequities with other jurisdictions, right? We have Unit 3 folks that we want to get to $18 an hour. That costs money. We want to stay competitive from a compensation standpoint to get the best and brightest teachers in here. And so this, I'm not trying to deflect the answer here, but these are all impact whether we can, reduce fees for students to participate in these extracurricular activities. Yes, athletics gets offset by gate receipts, as Mr. Silkworth alluded to, but that the athletics budget has, had a baseline there that to help offset some of those costs too. I think we're all committed to reducing, we shouldn't have to pay what we're describing here, but I think our realities are, we have so many unmet needs, as we've talked about, that we're going to have to just do this systemically over time.
And that's fair. I just, when I know that the out-of-pocket for some athletics is as low as $150, but to join marching band as a freshman is $750, breaks my heart. It also hurts me to hear testimony that, there's a fair number of musical instruments that are in disrepair, that some kids are playing MacGyver in their school programs to keep things going. That all bothers me too. And so it all goes back to like doing stuff we have right before adding to. It just, we're not at the budget amendment phase yet, and I haven't crafted any of them yet. But I just wonder, and it hurts like to tell people you have to, there's these inequities in place, and no, we're not going to cover any of your, or very little of your transportation, even though you're competing extracurricular, just like athletics is. When others get so much more. And so that's in school music that I'm addressing. That's instruments, or I guess that would be under materials of instruction, and that's out of pocket costs. And so I remember fighting well into the wee hours of the morning for robotics, and I'm delighted that we are making progress there, and Model UN and mock trial, all of those things. You got me at hello, but I'm just trying to daylight the needs that we have yet to fully address, and the wild staffing differentials depending on the school for these programs, and what it does to our students' experience and what it does to our educators teaching them. I think that's it for me. I think I've talked enough. Thanks.
And I just kind of add on to what you're saying, because again, I go back to slide 10 and I'm looking at $19,102 per pupil funding. And the reality is that's a regression from where it was
Last year.
a year ago, right? And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the Baltimore region consists of Baltimore City, Baltimore County, which is, I don't even know where, I can't see Baltimore. Yeah, they're ahead of us.
Yep.
So Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard, Montgomery, and I think Anne Arundel County.
Prince George. you
Prince
throw
George's.
in there too.
So those all consist of the schools that are bucketed into the Baltimore region schools. And we are the lowest out of all of those schools. We constantly are finding ourselves trying to chase Howard County, which is about $3,400 more per pupil. And I think about $3,400 times 82,000 students, what we could do. This again goes to this significant gap that we have just amongst those that are within our region, and what needs to happen. I don't know the answer, folks, because when we do these budget hearings, I have teachers saying, I can't afford to live in the district that I love to work in. So if we go and we say we want to raise more taxes, because that's the only way, you still won't be able to afford to live here. So I don't know how this gets fixed, because the only way you're going to move this from 19 to 22, you're going to have to tax like they do in Howard County. And then we can do some damage. You know, all these things everything that we want, and some of these basic things that you're talking about, Ms. Schauheim, is not us having to try to pit against whether we offer middle school athletics versus being able to make sure that kids are able to perform at a high level with band transportation to be able to compete. And so that has to change. And ultimately, there has to be an appetite for that to change. But I still don't think that it solves the problem of people being able to live in Anne Arundel County that work in this school district.
Okay. Ms. McFarland.
So firstly, around the co-curricular activities, is there any sort of fund set up for students who want to be in band or sports and just cannot afford the extra costs? Or do schools do that themselves, or is there just?
I mean, that's really a school-based.
Okay,
It could be
so
through
that'd
the
be-
boosters, the music boosters, or other
Okay.
avenues. But there is no offset for at the co-curricular or the district level to offset that.
Okay. I do want to make sure that all of our students are able to participate in what we offer. So also the high school student laptops, that's a huge line item. So I just have a few questions about it. So that is the initial cost of buying laptops for all of our high school
So
students.
be leasing them, yes.
Okay, and then how long are we expecting those 4 years or
4 years.
4
yep.
years?
And then they
Okay.
refresh. Yep.
Okay. So each year, do we have kind of a breakdown of maintenance of, ones that break or replacing? Or are we, students expected to buy insurance on it? I guess I kind of want to just understand what the ongoing cost is going to be versus the initial
Yeah,
cost.
so we have insurances built into this cost.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. And then is there, at some point, you mentioned about the Chromebooks then being redistributed to the lower levels. Is there a goal at some point to have middle school students with laptops, or are we going to
I'll say,
think about sticking with the Chromebooks?
I'll say to be determined on
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, obviously, it's great to have all of our students have the access to laptops, especially, if we need to go virtual at any point. We're already into our snow days, and so it's a very real concern. I had another question about the laptops. It left me. If it comes back, I'll raise my hand. Thank you.
Ms. Stent?
I think I know the answer, but I just want clarification on slide. Ooh, need some glasses up in here. 18. So I probably can say that I've met at least with 4 organizations that have spoken to me about the enormous amount of children that are not able to read. I think it was something like 45%. Don't quote me on that. I think it's like 45% based off of our last scores that are not ready to read. Am I reading this correct? Is that with the mandates from Blueprint that they're not funding the TSI?
So they are reducing their support for TSI. So when the blueprint was conceived, which was, if we have to remember, it was actually pre-pandemic. The thought was, and goes to Dr. Tobin's earlier point, as to reduce the identification of students needing IEPs, investment in pre-K, and then investment in students who are struggling learners was the term that they used. In that many students who have IEPs they don't have a disability, they're just struggling learners. And so if we have pre-K, and if we have what is transitional supplemental instructional, which essentially is 4-to-1 tutoring, right? So 1 tutor for every 4 students, intense tutoring that by the time they reach 3rd, 4th grade, they would be reading at grade level and exiting out. And so the idea was this funding ramped up to fiscal 24, and then at fiscal 25 started to come down. This year's fiscal 26, it's coming down even more. And then fiscal 27, it was to expire. What was supposed to sort of, as it was expiring, if you look at that collaborative planning time, that money was supposed to ramp up in order to backfill this $2 million cut, essentially. But what is now happening is that collaborative planning time money is getting cut, and the TSI money is still scheduled to be reduced, which is why on slide 20, where is it? There it is. Slide 24, that first line, we feel like it's important enough program where we would like to maintain it. And so we're seeking essentially general fund support to backfill. Now, option number 1 is really to advocate to get this $2 million restored, right? But if it doesn't, option 2, from our perspective, would be, and I think a pretty high priority for the administration, would be to get funding to keep these early intervention teachers in place. We've seen success, and I think it's been a program. It's been one of the successes of the blueprint from my perspective. And we'd like to see it continued, again, given where we are with reading scores, given the priority we have on early literacy, both at the district level and at the state level.
Thank you for that very, very intel. I did not make the connection between slide 18 and 23 or 24. So that's very important. And I say that because I was in a school And a young boy told me, and this is why I've been on this Ready to Read campaign for the last couple of months. He wasn't shy that he couldn't read, but when I asked him the question what he was reading, he looked up at me and just as kind as if he'd said, "Give me some coffee." He said, "I can't read." And I said, "What do you mean you can't read?" And he said, "Ask my teacher. I can't read." And I said, "Of course you can read." And he's like, "Well, I have a hard time reading." And I said, "You just don't like to read in public." And he said, no, ask my teacher. I can't read." So I really thought that he didn't understand my question. So I asked the teacher. I said, "What does he mean she can't read? He can't read?" And she said, "That's not uncommon. That sometimes we have struggling learners, to use your words. And this is why these programs are so very important." And it just shocked me when I see that we are having children in our school systems and understanding there's been evidence and proven that children are not, there are struggling children inside of not just our school system, many school systems. And so when we're cutting programs, I don't think that it's responsible of the state to really put it up on the district to be responsible for trying to figure out a way to fund programs as important as this, especially if we're putting all this money in early learning. And so if you don't find it from there, once again, you got another generation of children that will not be able to read by the time they hit third or fourth grade. And to me, that's unacceptable. So I will continue to advocate for not only the TSI, but just to make sure that you don't have to find the money somewhere else. This is where the money should come from, and this is the program that should be maintained. So not you, but me. All right. My last question, and actually it's a comment. I love the way that you did the slides, and I was looking at the scorecard based off of, and this is a test, so see if I got it right. It seems to me that this is going toward building and sustaining our future. If I were to do what you normally do, which goes toward the strategic, am I right?
But what part are you talking about when you talk about building and sustaining our future?
The transitional supplemental instruction.
Ultimately, that the whole focus of that, and I wanted to talk about that, is to ensure that that if our kids are reading by the time they hit third grade, and this is also in compliance with the state board, they've already basically said that there's going to be expectation around literacy. We want to make sure that we're getting ahead of it. But what it ultimately does is it opens kids up to being able to access grade level standards at a much earlier phase in their educational experience, opening up many other opportunities, in particular when you get to the high school level, college and career readiness by the time these kids get to the end of 10th grade. So in my opinion, I'm looking at that, and that is really more around probably goal one, if anything, which is just around the academic expectations of our kids being able to read and being able to access curriculum at a high level as they matriculate through. I think I want to make sure I'm answering your question right, because you were saying that the TSI, yeah, that is more about, that's instruction.
I say that to tell you that if we are going to support our strategic plan, our budget.
No, that supports our strategic plan.
Yes.
But that hands down support our strategic plan. Actually, I wrote this down. Believe it or not, I was going to wait until everybody finished making their comments because I wanted to be able to drive home with what I've heard. But I did. I wrote down that these 4 areas of focus, the whole piece around early literacy, that's what that is. That was one of the 4 major areas of focus. We had special education based on data, right? Special education was based on us doing deep data dives and saying we have to get help with the growing population. Early literacy, it was both. The KRAs that you talked about when you said there's a percent of kids, I think maybe it was at 53% or so, kids who enter in at kindergarten readiness. This hopefully will help be able to show that we're having kids enter into kindergarten. And we're having more success on whatever that early education assessment will be. We talked about ELL and multilingual supports because the data said we're missing the ballpark in there, and that all aligns with the strategic plan. And then the other one, which is more around investing in your staff, is the compensation, the 3% that we talked about along with the step. And if we could give more, we would, but those are the four major areas. And so when you take a hit on TSI, it only further compounds what we're trying to do around early literacy and making sure that our kids get what they need early on.
Thank you. Yes, that did answer my question. All right. That's it for me. No more rounds for me.
Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. So just to add one comment to your earlier comments, Dr. Bedell, about how do we get out of this? I mean, there is a way out of it. Ms. Schalheim alluded to it earlier. It's taxes, but it's progressive taxes. And, you know, taxes aren't just a hammer. They need to be done appropriately, and people need to understand what the cost of a good education in this century at this time is. To that point, Mr. Stansky, because this was a matter of a little bit of dispute between myself and a former board member last year, I want to just get clear for the public how these levels at which we find ourselves emerge very specifically. We have, for example, the local wealth per pupil, right? That puts Anne Arundel at 7th. While with regard to revenue per pupil, we are at 14th. My contention is that we are still spending below our wealth in this county, but the dispute is that, well, we're you know, according to what the county puts in, we're at 7th. So actually, we're not that far below our wealth. So could you sort out for the public sort of a few of those? I know it's complex,
I'll try.
but
Yeah,
sort of
no,
how
it's
we
fine.
end up in these different at these different
Right.
levels.
So inverse wealth formula, right? So meaning the wealthier a jurisdiction is per the state formulas, the more the state expects a local jurisdiction to contribute. So the formulas define wealth as your property tax base and your income tax base, not what people pay, not your rate of property taxes or your rate of income taxes, but essentially your ability to pay. It's an imperfect measure, but it's the measure nonetheless. And then taking that and dividing by the total student public school enrollment that you have, and that's where you get this local wealth per pupil, right? So if you look at Worcester County, that's not a surprise. Ocean City has a massive tax base there, and so they are considered, per the formulas, the wealthiest jurisdiction. Hence, they would get the least amount of state aid. And so based on that, we are deemed 7th, right? So like people are like, we're actually wealthier than Howard County, because the denominator for Howard County is they have a lot more of their population that are public school age students that go to public schools versus Anne Arundel. And so that's where we get that. And then from that then yields, this is what our total is, right? And then if you go to the state side, we're 19th in per pupil revenue on state aid, and then we are 5th in county aid. But I think to your point, we're almost 1,000 per student gap away from Kent, over 2,000 from Howard and Montgomery, and then obviously Worcester, we're 5,000 plus away. And so, the formulas are strictly just what's your county's ability to contribute, not whether they actually are contributing at the level that is expected.
So a couple of interesting things that come out of that. if I'm following you, one of those is that the fact that we have underfunded our public education system, which I think is a fairly straightforward
Data.
fact,
Right there.
which in fact has in many cases encouraged people to send their children to private schools, has in fact set us up
Well, right.
to receive less, right? I mean, that's part of the
actually,
Howard County
yes.
conundrum,
Great
right?
point. Yep.
People go to Howard County for the schools. They always have. The county itself has prioritized the schools because they know that that is sort of a core competency of their county. And so I think we have been put in a position where we've actually undermined ourselves as a county in what I believe to be a very short-sighted way of doing it. And if I follow you, again, Mr. Stansky, a lot of this is around things like property taxes at the base, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that we have kept, again, our property taxes lower than surrounding counties has set us up once again to be in this peculiar position. So I just want that clear for the public that that is the situation in which we find ourselves. There is a way out of it. And I will say again to our colleagues and funders that we were asked as a board a couple of years ago very directly to, quote, be brave and engage in something nobody could remember ever happening in this county, which was county-wide redistricting.
Oh.
And we are. And we are. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is the right thing to do, and we are doing it. And I am going to say to our funders, I hope when the time comes, you too will be brave and do the hard thing that is the right thing for our students, because that is the future of this community and this county. And it is short-sighted, either on the part of the state or the county, to do otherwise. So, thank you. Thank you for those explanations, Mr. Stansky.
Ms. McDermott.
Again, I cannot follow that up. I don't have anything else though. Thank you.
So you leave me to follow that up. Okay, that's fine. So a couple points of clarification. Concentration of poverty, that's what, 8.7 million? And according to what it says, is provides mandatory blueprint funding to support 38 current and 9 new community schools. There will then be a freeze.
Correct. After that, yes.
So during the 2 years of that freeze, that means that the funding will be 47.
So we'll have 47 schools, some of which will just get what's called the personnel grant, which is funding for your program manager and your registered nurse. Some will have a personnel grant and what's called the per pupil grant, which then that per pupil grant provides the wraparound services. That per pupil grant is phased in over like a 5-year period. So if you have the per pupil grant, you're frozen at your FY2026 level. It is only for the concentration of poverty. It is only a 2-year freeze, not the 4-year for the collaborative planning. But if you just have the personnel grant, then that's all you have for fiscal 27 and fiscal 26, 27, and 28.
Okay. And we've received some answers to some questions earlier. Just want to remind myself, if we needed some funds to make sure that we maximize our instrument inventory for students that involved in the orchestra, band, or whatever, was that a $300,000 figure?
Yeah, that's I believe that's what we responded with. Yes.
Okay, I thought that's what it was. And just another clarification, we've talked a bunch of times about school A versus school B.
Mhm.
And for school A, there was a average 18 years experience, and school B average 12 years experience. So we need to make sure that we have a highly qualified teacher in front of our students at all of our schools. But I didn't want anybody to think that 18 years means that those teachers are more highly qualified than those teachers that may just have
Correct.
12.
Correct. Yeah. If I implied that, I shouldn't have.
No,
but
no, no,
Yeah.
no. You didn't imply that. I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
that I had clarification on that. So I have to say, and I'm speaking, I guess, to our funding sources. So Anne Arundel County, yeah, we're a wealthy county, but the wealth is in the kids. That's really where it is. But we're a wealthy county with a tax rate that's not as high as some of the surrounding counties. And we haven't maximized the amount of money that we could generate from that. But guess what? I just got my home assessment. That assessment has gone up dramatically. Dramatically. Having said that, I'm speaking to the funding sources out there, particularly in Anne Arundel County. I think that if we need more resources from our funding source, folks, to meet the needs of our students so that we can go from good to great, it is my responsibility, our responsibility, to advocate for those resources, because we can and we will be great if we have those resources. So, having said that, I'm going to ask, does anyone else have any, Ms. Schauheim?
Yes, and my being fired up tonight is because I do care about our kids. I care about all of our children, and it is my job to advocate on their behalf. And it's my job to daylight things that need some work, and talk to our funding sources like I have every other single year I've been on this board. And yes, we have chronically underfunded public education, and I've said it so much over the last 7 years that I didn't say it tonight. It's still very much true in the state and across this country, unfortunately. All right, so I have a follow-up question with regard to laptops for high school students, because it's a big ticket item. I do understand that we're moving to a more sustainable funding source for this, for the refresh, rather than just buying it with cash. That I get. I get the need to move some of our inventory to middle and elementary school. What I guess I'm still not understanding, though, is if your student has a device at home, a laptop at home, a Windows laptop, or I guess an Apple, though I'm a PC myself, always have been, then why would we spend money where we might not need to, given that fact? Because on ClassLink they can access like all the things they might need. And so I guess where I'm having trouble with is I'm not I know middle schoolers, no slide to middle schools, make bad decisions, but I'm not thinking that suddenly, because 6 months have passed, that my now ninth grader will make a better decision just because 6 months have passed than she did as a middle school student. So I'm just wondering if the juice is worth the squeeze with that part. Like if the kid has a device at home, can't they just use their device at home rather than schlepping an expensive piece of equipment to and from every day?
Yeah, I think the plan here is really our main focus is what are they using in the building during the day. So
Okay.
I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Burkowski, but for security reasons, bring your own device just isn't the best idea. So, but
I'm not suggesting that.
Right, but I think we need something for them to use in the building during the day as a primary. Yes, there are some students that have devices at home, but the students who have devices at home are still going to need to use something during the day, given all of the digital curriculum we have, especially in high school. And so we just, people use laptops a lot now. I don't know that the Chromebook is the best device for students, and especially in high school. Just like given once you leave high school, you probably will never use a Chromebook again. Right. And so this is really your opportunity to begin to learn a device or have a device that A, allows you to access the curriculum in school, and B, allows you to learn how to use a device that you're going to be using depending on your chosen profession, possibly for the rest of your adult life. And so that's the approach we want to take here with high school. So I hope that answers your question, because even with the device at home, we still need something for the student to use in during the school day.
Yeah, but say the $6 million goes through us, and then stays intact throughout the process, which is a big sack of if, and we know that.
Yep.
All of this is. Are we suggesting that if I have that we would go 1-to-1, and that kid would have to then schlep the thing back and forth? Or if you have a device at home, can you just make use of a device in school, leave it at school? Like, what are the assumptions? Will it be like
I
COVID
believe
years?
we assumed they'd take the device home with them. Yes, they would bring the device back and forth.
Back and forth.
Like you and I used to bring textbooks back and forth, right?
Yes, I
Like,
know, but my textbook didn't cost $1,000 out.
well,
Or maybe it did, but it didn't have it wouldn't shatter upon impact necessarily.
Right. Which is again why
also
we
covered with a paper bag
which is also
from the grocery store.
lessons learned, which is why that $6 million includes insurance.
Okay. All right. One more thing. So I wasn't going to go there, but then there was a slide that touched on this, so I guess I am. Given the increased utility costs coming our way, are there any strategies that we can employ to help with that? To offset that? Yeah, I know. We thought we would get away with not, but y'all brought it up, so there you go.
Yeah, I think it's with the help of our new long-range study, we're going to be looking at energy efficiency in our buildings.
Okay.
We're going to prioritize ones that are, the gas guzzlers, the ones that use a lot of electricity, and try to do some retrofits in those buildings, as well as prioritize those for replacement, so that we're getting more energy efficient inventory in our portfolio, and that we're better stewards of taxpayer money.
All right. Because that might help. Because I think I remember the one year that I really went on and on and on about this. I think our power and light line item was like north of 18 million. I'm sure I did look, but I don't have it in front of me tonight. I know it's way beyond that. So any number of millions of dollars we can reap back by continuing to employ more energy efficiency strategies is a happy, because we can put that money elsewhere in capital or otherwise in operating budget. I actually now think that's all that I have. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Ms. Puller.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back to the chart number 31. Forgive me, I don't have my my glasses. Can you go back to the 90 million reduction in terms of consortium on community support?
Mm-hmm.
And it's my understanding that that covers the social, is that more the mental health piece?
Yes, but it's not AACPS directed revenue or employees. So it is, think of an organization like Thrive, that is a nonprofit that provides mental health services that partners with AACPS. That money is something that organization would apply for, receive, and then provide services. So it's not a direct budget impact on AACPS, but it is definitely a service level impact that,
Yeah.
that these outside organizations were able to access this funding to provide mental health supports for our students that is being reduced.
So I keep going back to that piece because really, even though it's a service that's being provided, if I'm thinking about it correctly, it really spans across different domains. It could be helpful to the community schools. It could be helpful to the day schools. It can be helpful to all these different communities. And that's one area I really want to see if how can we move things around to make that work? Because when you think about your special education community, your farms community, your ELL community or bilingual, all of these communities need those services. And I think, and even the community schools as a whole. So that's one, so I wanted to get back to that because it wasn't really uncovered that I wasn't really grasping what that meant. But when Ms. Dent said, I'm worrying about thinking about the proficiencies and making sure children can read, that's another component that's really important there. So that to me is something if we could pull that thread a little bit more and how we can move things around maybe. In terms of Ms. Schellheim, your comments on the computers. So when you come with the problem, you have to think of a solution, right? Like I go back to during COVID, everyone got the Chromebook. And maybe it's one of those situations where we have a tiered approach like you have in industry or academia, where what is the real requirements? Even though we'd like to give everyone in high school a laptop, what are the real requirements and who actually needs them, the actual laptops versus the Chromebooks? And that could help us move around, shift some of this money around. Because I'll tell you, I've heard from more than one parent that said, oh, and even students, oh, I just put it under my bed because I'm not going to use it. And so to me, I'm like, whoa, that's taxpayer dollars. So, I know that would be great. I would love it because my mom didn't have that funding back to probably have my laptop when I was younger. But at the same time, what do we need to meet the need so that we can make other things work? So I don't know if it's a tiered approach and release. And a lot of parents actually this year, they're receiving the Chromebooks mid-season, but they're like, we've already brought my children a laptop that's better than the Chromebook. I've already purchased something. So those are some things I just wanted to bring to light, but definitely them 90 million in reduction here, that really goes back to the scorecard. It's really that thread that goes through like each piece of our strategy. Like I said, anything we can do. And the last comment I have is, I can't afford additional taxes. I just want you to know me personally. The energy levels are going up, the energy prices are going up, the property taxes. So I understand, but I don't have that much money remaining after all of these things. So increase in taxes, I get it. But the county executive also has the right to add additional funding after the council has approved. I'd prefer the latter approach versus the increase in taxes if we could, but definitely working within our means. And the computer, that piece it won't solve our problem, but it might be something that we can look at and then the following year reassess. So thank you. That's it.
Okay, so I'm seeing no more lights, so I would like Dr. Bedell, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank your staff, Mr. Stansky, and everyone here, plus everyone over there, for this great workshop and presentation. It really helps us a tremendous amount, and I thank you all.
Yep.
Absolutely. So that will conclude our workshop. One announcement, the Board of Education will be meeting tomorrow evening. I believe it's the 22nd of January. It'll be an evening meeting here in the boardroom. We'll vote to go into closed session at 4:30, and we'll be meeting here at 6:30. So thank you so much for being with us. Please drive safely. Stay warm. Good night.